Young lady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Buffalo, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to all of you for being here, for your incredibly insightful, thoughtful, and important testimony today. And I want to thank Chairman Benny Thompson for holding this important hearing, and really for all of the work that he's done on election integrity and security over the course of the last 2 decades as the chair of the Committee on Homeland Security. Election security, free and fair elections have been a priority. So again, Chairman, thank you for your leadership. The Chairman also led the House Select Committee to investigate the attack on the United States Capitol on January 6th, which at its heart was about election conspiracy theories that we're hearing about in this testimony here today. It continues. And so I appreciate all of your efforts to be here today to bring this unique state-level experience to this perspective as we're going into election season and as our colleagues across the aisle are driving forward an agenda that would restrict voter access. It's so important that we are hearing about, learning about both what's at stake in the present as well as the history that brought us here. I had the opportunity to serve in the New York State Senate for the better part of 14 years and was very proud to help transform our election laws in New York to improve access and security and transparency in our elections. That included increasing absentee ballot drop boxes, expanding early voting sites, voting by mail, and improving election misinformation protections. The last priority, of course, particularly essential, given that the president is actively working to sow misinformation in our elections, undermine state procedures and protections, and block access to the ballot box, is part of a larger effort to ensure he sees the election results he wants later this year. As a matter of fact, he has dictated to Republican members of Congress that if they don't pass the SAVE Act, that it will restrict voter access for millions of Americans, they'll lose the election. It is blatant voter suppression, and it cannot be accepted. We've also seen troubling executive actions during Trump's second term in an effort to nationalize elections, empower the U.S. Postal Service to decide who can and cannot vote, and discredit state and local election officials like some of you here today who provide access to the polls. Commissioner Ivey, thank you for your testimony. You have direct experience navigating President Trump's obsession with the 2020 election results, which continues to manifest in troubling ways 6 years later, as you testified here today, namely the seizure of ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, early this year. And I got to tell you, I'm disgusted to hear of how that all went down. And I believe the people of America are as well. Again, intimidation tactics. How does that hearken to what you've seen historically in the past in Georgia?
Yeah, well, we in Georgia, we often call this era Jim Crow Part 2, because we feel that it has all of the elements of all of the racist and voting suppression tactics that were used against our community for so many years. And we even see it in legislation that is happening right now. That's why it's been so important for us in Fulton County to fight against the state election board appointments and the tactics that they are trying to use, as well as our local Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections when they tried to force 2 MAGA Republicans onto our board this year. That is how those conspiracy theories will continue to permeate through Fulton County when those type of individuals are on boards that have the power to then decide not to certify an election or decide not to follow the law. So we have to fight against those appointments at every level, locally and at the state level, because that is where we can shut down that power being exerted upon our voters. And I vow to continue doing that no matter what the consequences are.
Thank you so much for that. One of our great great colleagues and friends and a real trailblazer here in Congress and in America is Congressman Jim Clyburn, who recently wrote a book, The First Eight, which details the dark days of the Jim Crow South that both you and Ms. Clark have spoken about. And, you know, I think it's important not just to talk about that sort of generalize, but what that actually means. Because, you know, what I learned about in the book was about the gerrymandering, the intimidation, the violence, among many other things, led by the Klan, and then becoming the law of the land. That took from 1897, where the last black member of the House of Representatives was elected from South Carolina, 95 years, until our friend and colleague, Congressman Clyburn, was elected in 1992. That is the power of law, and it's also the power of why it's so important that we protect free and fair elections, truly free and fair elections. But if you could, Ms. Clark, because you referred to this as well, talk about some of those, if you could expand on some of that dark history of what we're fighting against and how the Klan and then ultimately the elected leaders use the power of the pen and the law to suppress the vote, and why we need to push back against that voter suppression today.
Yeah, the most powerful example of the display of ugly racial violence and voter suppression that we've ever seen in modern time was Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, Bloody Sunday. Shelby County was bad as well. But Congressman, I point that up because you and I walked across the bridge in Selma, Alabama, just a few weeks ago to pay homage to those who paid a tremendous sacrifice to bring us the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And at the NAACP, we'll do everything that we can to not see our country return to those dark days and to that treacherous moment. This administration is bent on using violence and hatred and chaos to discourage and instill fear. And we are focused and determined on ensuring that black voters and every eligible American is able to have voice in our democracy. And we do so remembering the history.
Thank you. And lastly, because I'm tight on time here, Mr. Chairman, I just maybe anyone on the panel can answer, but you know, along the same lines, the federal government has historically been engaged in making sure elections are free and fair, holding states accountable. At least post-Civil War, that was the heart of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now we seem to see a change in tactics of the federal government, where now we see states having to stand up and protect themselves from a federal government overreach to suppress elections, free and fair elections. What do you make of that tactic?
It's time consuming, and it's designed to take us off the ball. Every election is a monumental event of working together with our 1,600 clerks across the state of Michigan to ensure that we have the ability to administer this election to 8 million people. But when you add on unnecessary things, it's designed to not allow those people to vote, and it's a grave danger to all of us.
Mr. Norton?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's harassment, frankly, of many of the officials. And I think it's worth noting that this administration loses every time it goes to court on these issues, right? They're suing 30 states to get private data. There have been 5 decisions. They've lost all 5 of those cases. We have executive orders from this president, which are clearly violations of the Constitution. He lost on the first one in 3 separate courts. He's going to lose on the second one. But in the meantime, we have people who need to run these, who have a tremendous amount of work to do to make sure that we have free, fair, and secure elections. And they are being not just harassed, but diverted from doing jobs of serving their communities.
Thank you. As we get closer to the 2026 election midterms, I hope the congressional Republicans will take their duty seriously, call out the president's lies about our elections, and understand how dangerous it is for both our national security, our democratic institutions, and our nation's future. And I thank you all. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.